Welcome to the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC on ESPN 61, Tybura versus Spivak 2, also known as UFC Vegas 95. I'm your host, Ben Duffy of Sherdog.com. With me, as always, at least as usual, is Keith Shillan, the executive producer of the Sherdog Radio Network. Keith, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, man. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. We missed you on the recap last night for UFC Abu Dhabi. The inmates ran the asylum. I gave blatantly false information.
You did,
Mike, like accusing you of picking the wrong guy in the main event.
Yeah.
Just because I got it wrong. I was just trying to get Liz Really Loves company. Like, well, we all got it wrong. No, only I got it wrong.
No, I got enough wrong. I picked Olasechik to win, so I shouldn't be talking. Actually, no, I didn't. No, I didn't. Don't go back. Don't go back and check.
Don't go back and check.
I picked my fellow redhead.
All right. So, how's it going other than that?
It's going good, man. A lot of softball, as you mentioned, on the recap show. Also, I'm doing some furniture shopping right now, which is dreadful. Yeah, we need new furniture. We've had the same furniture for like 18 years, and we finally, it's time to go.
And once your youngest kid gets past a certain age, you're like, okay, we can get new furniture, and it will just be completely dog shitted, within a year.
Well, it probably will still be because my youngest is only 9, but honestly, like he watches TV and stuff. He's more like, we don't have a TV in the room. He like goes on he has like a little computer thing where he plays video games and stuff on. So he'll like watch on that. He really doesn't go on. Usually, honestly, going downstairs, the only person that like where we would have our furniture was my wife, and she likes to watch down there. And then like, well, if we watch a movie as an entire family, get pizza and stuff, so I do that. And then when I used to like get fights and stuff, or I watch some like the Super Bowl down there, but there is nothing worse than furniture shopping. It is. I don't know. It's dreadful.
It's dreadful. I agree. And shopping at like traditional furniture stores, it's almost like shopping for a car. They come at you with the financing first. Like, how much can you afford to pay a month? And knowing you, I know that that's a non-starter for you.
No. Yeah, I don't do that. I don't do that. Cash is king.
Yeah, which, I mean, that's a nice thing for me about like Costco. Like if I need a couch, I'll just kind of start looking at Costco every weekend until I see one I like, buy it with cash, take it home. Yeah.
So right now, for you guys who tuned into UFC Vegas, whatever it is, no, this is actually the Shillan Duffy finance show. So we're gonna go through the 7 baby steps of Dave Ramsey right now, and Ben's
stop buying crap you can't afford, guys.
Yeah, Ben's gonna give you what stocks to buy, which give you a stock.
Take my stock advice as seriously as you would take. Never mind. Some of you guys actually do bet based on my fight pick, so I can't even say that to you. No, like I want to be like that Caleb Hammer guy that always looks like he's smelling something bad. Like when he talks to me, he's like yeah, that's the guy. I mean, the reason this is kind of dragging out is that we got UFC Vegas 95. In my opinion, this is a weird card. It is bookended on both ends by 2 of the weirder matchups or rematches the UFC has put together in a while. The headliner is Marcin Tybura versus Sergey Spivak. That I'll put you on the spot later and ask, is this maybe the most pointless rematch between top 10 fighters ever? And then it opens up with Stephanie Luciano and Talita Alencar, who got in a draw on the Contender Series. Both got signed anyway, having a rematch. And their first fight on the Contender Series was less than a year ago. So it's not even like Tybura and Spivak, where they've clearly, developed and changed over the last couple of years. It's an odd one, man.
The only rematch in recent history that I can think of that made no sense, it would probably Liz Carmouche versus Juliana Velasquez like 900 times when they fought each other. Juliana Velasquez lost to Liz Carmouche 3 fights in a row.
That was a rough one. I mean, at least a couple of those were title fights. This is one where the first fight wasn't that exciting. While they're both in the top 10, whoever wins, it's not like they're 1 or 2 fights away from a title shot. It's just 2 big old European dudes fighting again. And you can tell that this wasn't the UFC's first choice for this because they only made this matchup like 3.5 weeks ago. Like there are fights on this card.
I don't think Tybura Spivak is anybody's first pick.
At the least, it wasn't the UFC's first pick for the main event, but it's just kind of interesting that this main event was put together on literally like 3 weeks notice, which leads me to believe they might have been holding out for something else. This is what we got. We got 11 fights. If there was a theme to last week's card in Abu Dhabi, it was that it was jammed with people that we kind of forget about because they fight once or twice a year because they can't fight in Western Europe or North America for whatever reason. This one is just full of really new fighters. Like there are some veterans. You got the 2 headliners. You got Yana Santos. But then there are 22 fighters on this card, okay? 11 fights, 22 fighters. 13 of the 22 are still on their first UFC contract. They have 3 or fewer fights in the UFC. 6 of them have fewer than a dozen pro fights total. Like, if you're looking at this card right now and you're like, I don't recognize some of these names, that's why. Lots of them are just new to the UFC or just new, period. What would you say you're looking forward to most on this one?
Probably Basharat Gutierrez. That's probably the best fight.
I'd agree.
I mean, when I'm talking about like relevance in the division, I mean, there's some fun fights. I mean, Chepe and Jackson will be really fun.
Yeah.
Like there'll be ones like that, but the ones that when it comes to rankings and moving up and action and the total package, it's got to be Basharat versus Gutierrez. The main event, like I actually like a lot of the prelim fights. Like I like a lot of the people on it. I think some action fighters. This reminds me of like you get like a 6-pack of donuts from Dunkin' Donuts, and you like, a coworker comes in like, hey, I got some donuts. Everyone gets up and go grabs a donut. Someone's, first person grabs a jelly, the next person grabs like a chocolate sprinkled and everything, and then you're like the last one to go, and you gotta get the last donut. You open it up, and it's like just an old-fashioned donut.
It's like, oh, fine, all right.
Like, all right, I'll eat it. But, like, that's nobody's first choice.
Oh man,
that's what this is. The two, and no, those guys know about eating donuts too. So,
yeah, UFC on ESPN 61. Nobody's first choice is what we're going to call this one. Any other general thoughts on this card before we dive into those prelims? I don't know how I'm gonna work this into the story. So let me tell you a fun, really fun story real quick. Oh,
is it? Can I do?
right.
I haven't done story time with Keith in a long time, but I think people will like this one. So this is going off of the Sound of Music that we had a lot of fun with a couple of weeks back. As everyone knows, that's like my wife's like favorite movie ever. So the Sound of Music is like the play came to our town, and this place called Theater by the Sea. It's a small place. It's near the water. It's a beautiful place. It's like this old barn. So we get dressed up, trying to like, we go dinner at some fancy restaurant. My wife's in like a sundress, looking all pretty. She has the makeup on. I'm out there. I'm like trying to like clean myself up. Look like I'm a theater person. Like I'm wearing, button up shirt and some khaki pants. Like I look good. Right. And then we go. And I don't know, there's like the balcony, but we're not in the balcony. We're in the like first floor, but we're like underneath the balcony. Like, I don't know what it's called, but like, it's above us, yeah. And then we're below it. But like we're, like the first half of the first floor is like not underneath the balcony. And then the second half is.
So you're like on the mezzanine or type area or.
Sure.
Right.
I guess that's what it's called. So, dude, this place, we've been there before. Something was wrong with AC, and it was like 100 degrees this week. But the AC's in our section. So I'm dying before the play. I'm like, what is going on? I'm so hot. I'm like, I thought I was having a heart attack because I'm looking around. I'm fanning myself with a little, program. I'm looking around, and nobody else. And I'm like, I'm at that age where like, well, young to have a heart attack, but it's also not a realm of possibility either. I got a pretty stressful job. I got to deal with you all the time. Like I stay up to freaking 4 o'clock in the morning to break down fights and shit. And I'm like, I never sleep. And I'm like, I think I'm having a heart attack. Cause I'm like, I'm overheating. and I look around and nobody else is doing it. I'm fainting. Like I get up. I gotta go to the bathroom. I went to the bathroom just to like get up and like splash water. I go get ice from like the bar and like I'm like sipping ice and I'm like, what the fuck's going on? I keep telling my wife, like, is this hot? Is it really hot? So finally she starts saying it's super hot. Dude, I went from like dressing all nice to in the play, I took my shirt off. I'm sitting in the ground with no shirt on. So yeah, I'm at a play with no shirt on. I'm absolutely white trash. Who's more white trash than me? Who's more white trash? Imagine you're sitting there, you got like a cocktail, you have to play, you look over, that's a friggin' redheaded guy with no shirt on in the back.
Oh, and add to this that if I'm there, I'm in a section that has AC, so I have no idea why you have no shirt on. Like, honey, what the hell is up with that dude?
Like, I mean, it was dark, so like most people didn't see it. Like right when dude, the break, right when the break was coming.
Look at the color of your skin. If you got no shirt on, people can see you.
Yeah, that's true. But someone probably thought I had my freaking flashlight on. Guy, turn the flashlight off. So luckily at the break, I like right when it was about to like, I could tell like when it's gonna, what do you call it? You know, the intermission or whatever. Mm-hmm. I put my shirt back on and I walked up to the guy and I'm like, dude, is something wrong with it? Like, it is unbelievably hot. And the guy's like, no, that's wrong. He goes up and he goes, dude, it's not even on. Then he puts it on. I'm like, you fucking really, guys? Yeah. So anyways, I thought you guys would like that story. There I am with no shirt on at the freaking play.
That sounds like something that they would do for like a hidden camera prank on somebody. Yeah. Like just
there you go.
That's amazing.
I think I'm still dehydrated from that. I mean, dude, sweat was coming down my face. Like not like little beads. I mean, I was sweating. That's why I thought I was having a heart attack. Anyways.
That sounds miserable.
Luckily, everybody else in my section complained and said it was hot.
First up at UFC on ESPN 61 is a women's strawweight matchup between Stephanie Luciano and Talita Alencar. Luciano, 24-year-old Brazilian, is 5-1-1 overall. She fought on the Contender Series last September, fighting to a draw with Alencar. She will try to get a for-real win over her in the second go-round. Alencar, also Brazilian, 33 years old, Brazilian by way of Florida. She is 5-0-1. That one draw, of course, in her appearance on the Contender Series. She has already had her UFC debut. She fought back in September at UFC Fight Night Song versus Gutierrez, where she won a split decision over Rayane Amanda dos Santos. Odds here favor Luciano in the rematch. She is minus 170. Alencar plus 140 or so coming back. I can understand why the odds favor Luciano if you watched the first fight, just because it was a pretty straightforward tale of two fights. Alencar was doing well in the first two rounds, clearly getting tired late in the second round. And then in the third round, she gassed out so badly that Luciano just put an absolute whooping on her, got a 10-8 round on all three judges' scorecards, which is pretty rare, especially on the Contender Series. And we ended up getting a draw. I think people who watched that fight, and these two are rematching less than a year later, Alencar hasn't fought again since then, so we don't have any overwhelming reason to believe that that's going to have changed. She's 33. So if it were the 24-year-old that had gassed out badly in the first meeting, I could see there being, more of a reason to believe, things might have changed since then. But yeah, like I said, I don't want to sound like I'm hating on this card too bad, but I don't see a ton of points in this rematch. If the UFC believes that both these women belong, they've got other women they can match each up against. In the absence of that, well, I expect it'll go a little bit like the first fight. Alencar will probably be able to get Luciano down in the early going, do some work, maybe not do a ton of damage, but clearly dictate, win the rounds, put her in compromising positions, grappling wise, land some strikes down there. But she burnt so much gas doing that the first fight. Just Luciano did a good job of making her work. I expect Luciano will, at worst, pull ahead as the fight goes along. And who knows, as the much younger fighter and the one who's already had another fight in between and beat a pretty good fighter in Rayane Amanda, I mean, she may just be the better fighter from the get-go at this point. I like Luciano by decision here. She was almost she was a 2-1 underdog going into the first fight. She's almost a 2-1 favorite here. I echo that sentiment. Give me Luciano by decision.
I hope this fight ends in a draw. It'd just be funny. Like, good MMA history. I am surprised by the betting line, just because when I watched that first fight, I did score it a draw. Mm-hmm. That said, and I'm glad the judges scored it a draw. That said, it's not often that judges give 10-8 rounds. That in most other places, Alencar wins that fight. 29-28.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know,
it gets a majority decision because only one judge gives the 10-8. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think Luciano had the, favor of having good judges that night. I don't know who judged, and I'm not saying they're overall good judges, but in this one fight, they were good. Alencar, I mean, despite being older, she's a pretty good athlete. Like, she's got some good output on the feet, though she can be really wild and throw really hard. I'd say she has some plus power, despite being a really small fighter. The problem is her defense on the feet. She lacks head movement. And her striking is really just a setup her entry. She's got good entries, especially early. She has some quick entries, though she will sometimes shoot too far away without any setup. That's what kind of happened the further she went in the fight. What I think she should have done in the third round is do what I've seen her before, like shoot and pull guard. If she was able to shoot and pull guard and not give Luciano the whole round to really tee off on her, she probably does win that fight 29-28. She's a good grappler. I mean, she's a black belt. I know she's won like a bunch of world championships. Again, I take that for what it's worth. It's not Muay Thai level of irrelevant world championships, but it seems like everybody is a world champion in BJJ. She's got good top game. Some mean ground and pound. She has 3 subs on her record. But you mentioned she gassed out bad. I mean, that was a big difference. She wrestled so much that she gassed herself out, and Luciano took over. Luciano's only 24 years old. That's what I love that. She's a good striker, fast hands, pretty accurate. She throws a lot of combinations down the pipe. She attacks with combinations, which I like. Good variety of striking, goes high, goes low, works the body well, especially late against Alencar. She was really going to the body. Good teep kicks. Her offensive grappling, I've seen a little bit of it, nothing too impressive. She's a weak defensive wrestler, but I like her submission defense, to her credit. Like, she was taken down a lot by Alencar, but she worked out at some bad positions. I think this is a fun match because the first fight was fun. Mm-hmm. Again, being that one of the fighters won 2 out of the 3 rounds, I can't believe this is not a pick'em fight. Like, they just fought and it was a draw. Like, why is, if Alencar paces himself a little bit more, or again, like you said, get the right judges, or no, I should say get the wrong judges.
Yeah.
Or get the usual judges.
That's the word, the usual. Yes.
And again, before someone asks me like, "Oh, Chris Lee was good," yeah, I don't know who was. I'm not saying these judges were good. I'm just saying for this one moment they were. Being that she won 2 rounds, like, I can't believe it's this big. Like, 2-1 favorite. Like, that's usually a pretty confident pick. I mean, Alencar won 2 rounds pretty easy. Luciano won 1/3. I think that said, I think Luciano's the one that can make the adjustments improve. I mean, it's easy to say, Alencar, you got to just pace yourself. But if she's pacing herself, she's not fighting as high a pace. If she's getting those takedowns, if she controlling as long in the first and second round, she has back takes and stuff. Luciano's just got to stuff takedowns, really. I mean, if she can do better at that and kind of go to the body earlier, I think she can kind of cruise to victory. And she's at the age where she can make bigger improvements, especially in the takedown defense. I think she's gonna. I think she's gonna brawl and brawl. I think she's gonna dominate. After I just said it shouldn't be a pickup, I think she's gonna get that late stoppage. Give me Luciano by 3rd round TKO.
We head now to the featherweight division for a clash between Youssef Zalal and Jarno Errens. Zalal, the 27-year-old Moroccan fighting out of Denver, is 14-5-1 overall. He's 4-3-1 across 2 separate stints with the UFC. He's 1-0 since returning earlier this year. He made his return fight back in March at UFC on ESPN, Ribas versus Namajunas, where he tapped out Billy Quarantillo in the second round. He will look to make it 2 in a row, continue to reward the UFC for its decision to re-sign him at the expense of Errens. 29-year-old Dutchman is 14-5-1 as well. You don't see that too often. He is 1-2 since joining the UFC a little under 2 years ago. He is coming in off a win. After dropping his first 2 UFC bouts, he finally got into the win column with a unanimous decision victory over Stephen Nguyen at that same Ribas versus Namajunas card. So he also looking to make it 2 in a row, redeem himself right in time to probably be on the chopping block to sign a new contract. He is not favored to do so. Zalal is, if I recall correctly, the biggest favorite on the card. He's minus 350, Errens plus 250.
Wow.
It's a rare thing about Youssef Zalal. Like, Zalal was a fun fighter his first go round in the UFC. Even though he didn't have a great run in his last couple of fights, it was a little interesting that I believe the UFC cut him without even letting him fight out his second 4-fight deal. But they re-signed him, and ahead of the UFC re-signing him, everyone at Factory X could not stop talking about how improved Zalal was. And normally, fighters talking about their own teammates is about as unreliable as news gets. Like, of course, they're going to gas up their teammates. That's what they do. I mean, how many fighters have come at us for our predictions ahead of one of their teammates' debuts in the UFC? But with Zalal, and Factory X has a ton of good fighters, and especially they have a ton of good fighters in his general weight range. And people like Chris Gutierrez, who's fighting further up this card, they'd be getting interviewed about their own fight, like nothing to do with Zalal at all. And they would find time to mention, Youssef Zalal is killing all of us in the gym. For once, where there was smoke, there was fire, because Zalal looked like a different man in his return. Just physically looked faster, stronger, sharper. He had the same basic approach. It's not the exact approach you would expect. I mean, you see kind of a lanky Moroccan guy, and you assume you're going to get a high-flying kickboxer. I mean, he presents and stands as a kickboxer, and he knows how to kickbox, but what's been most effective for him at the UFC level has been his wrestling and his ground game, strangely enough. And he whooped Billy Quarantillo with pace, pressure, and ground game. He did to Quarantillo a little of what Quarantillo usually does to other people. It was an eye-opening performance for me. And while I've been hesitant to give up entirely on Errens, this is not the fight for him to stay on track. Errens is a kickboxer, and I mean, very much in the Dutch style, kind of upright, a little stiff looking by design. And I don't think he's going to be able to dictate the kind of fight that he would need to beat Zalal. He would need to dictate the distance and the pace, and Zalal's just not going to let that happen. Errens is going to try to set up on the outside of punching range in his sweet spot for kicking, and it's just not going to work. I think Zalal is going to put him on the back foot, push him to the fence, probably find takedowns pretty early and pretty often. Yeah, this is just a bad matchup for Errens. And I'm going to say it doesn't take that long either. Give me Zalal. I'm going to say once again by submission, first half of the second round, just like the Quarantillo fight.
Yeah, this is a fun matchup. I think Zalal should have been higher up the card than this, based on his last performance. But he, like you mentioned, he looked sensational against Billy Quarantillo. Long, lengthy fighter, very athletic, always moves well, good boxer, especially from distance. Like quick hands. I love his stepping knees. Great kicking game. Kicks to the legs, throws up a quick high kick. But you mentioned this dude could wrestle. He kept doing this in the Quarantillo where he stepped into the pocket and hitting this nasty foot sweep, which I loved. And then he could also shoot from the outside. Well, kind of a weak defensive wrestler. But I don't know if you want to take him down. He's a good submission artist. I mean, super slick grappler. I mean, he took Billy Quarantillo's back several times. And Quarantillo's a good grappler himself. If you put him on his back, he can look for submissions. He subbed Billy Quarantillo wicked fast, which is a really good feat in itself. It's been a while, but go back to like the Deporia fight. where he showed how hard he was to submit. Topuria had him in some deep subs, and he kept finding ways to get out. And he's good cardio. I mean, he came on late, even against like Topuria in their fight, and that was before like the resurgence of this guy. And DeMar Blackshear is another guy that he kind of came on late. Errens, I think I like him a little better than the betting lines do. Not necessarily in this fight, but I mean just in general. I think he's better than his UFC record shows. I mean, he looked great against Steve the Win in his last fight. Yeah. Good output. He's a Muay Thai striker, which means he's going to stand directly in front of his opponent and kind of hold his ground. But he'll also march forward. Trying to keep his head off the center line. He's got fast hands. He's an accurate striker. Good variety of striking. He likes to work the body with a straight right. He hits hard. What I like is, I like that he'll throw a lot of kicks, but he doesn't check leg kicks, I should say I like that he throws kicks. I don't like that he doesn't check leg kicks. I always want to make that clear. He also spend way too much energy throwing out like spinning wheel kicks and karate kicks and stuff like that. Really doesn't work. He's got a judo background, but he can get some takedowns in there, but he's not the greatest defensive wrestler. He struggles to get back to his feet. He can catch a submission though. He's got 6 subs. I mean, even almost got like William Gomez in their fight with a sub. So like I said, I think Errens is a decent fighter. I know you've been a guy who's been sold on Zalal's like reinvention of himself. I'm jumping on board with it. Like he looked really good. I think he could win a rangy kickboxing bout, but I don't think he's gonna. Like, I think he's gonna wrestle it. I think he's gonna wrestle a lot, and he's gonna control on the ground. I think Errens is a pretty decent, submission grappler. The problem is he's going to be put on the defense this whole time, and it's going to be too much grappling. I'm actually going to say that Zalal just wins the decision. I think Errens surprised people makes it to the decision, but give me Zalal by decision.
Heavyweights are up next at UFC Vegas 95 as Jhonata Diniz looks to stay undefeated against Karl Williams. Diniz, the 33-year-old Brazilian, is 7-0 overall. He's 1-0 since joining the UFC out of season 7 of Dana White's Contender Series. He made his debut back in April at UFC on ESPN Nikolay versus Perez, where he knocked out Austin Lane in the second round. He will look to make it 2-0 in the UFC, 8-0 overall at the expense of Williams. 34-year-old Atlanta native is 10-1 overall. He is 3-0 in the UFC. He's already fought once this year. He took a unanimous decision over Justin Tafa at the Hebus versus Namajunas fight night back in March. Prior to that, he had decision wins over Lucas Dresky and Chase Sherman. So he's looking to make it 4 in a row. And even in the modern UFC heavyweight division, which is actually fairly deep historically, you can't win 4 in a row without starting to attract some attention. So, maybe a marquee type matchup on the line if Williams can keep it going here. And he is favored to do so. Minus 225. Diniz is plus 175 coming back. Keith, as unranked heavyweight slobber knockers go, I feel like this one has a little more promise than most. I mean, tell me whether you agree with that assessment and tell me who you think wins this one.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, you got one guy who's undefeated, you got the other guy who's, on this big, somewhat big winning streak for the UFC. So, yeah, I think this is good. Who did you say the favorite was? It's
Williams, and pretty handily. He's minus 225.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised by that. If you asked me to pick that one, not that surprised that he's a favorite. I'm just surprised he's that big based on Diniz having that undefeated record. You guys usually get a little bit of a shine because of that. I mean, Williams is a good athlete for a heavyweight. He's got good footwork. He's pretty explosive, quick hands on the feet, nice jab, follows with some clean 1-2s down the pocket. For like an undersized heavyweight, he's got, like little underrated power. Like he can crack a little bit. A lot of kicks, likes teep kicks, good calf kicks. Doesn't check leg kicks though. He's a good wrestler though. He's an explode through your hips kind of guy. Though he can shoot too far away without a setup. But I've been impressed so far with wrestling. I go all the way back to the Contender Series fight where he out-wrestled Jimmy Lawson, former Penn State wrestler. Don't go too excited, wrestling, beating a Penn State wrestler. I mean, this Jimmy Lawson. This wasn't, this wasn't Bo Nickal, so that he was out-wrestling. But he can get some body lock takedowns. good top control. What I like is in his last fight, he was controlling like post-up arms. That's something I really love from the Dagestanians do. That's what I mean by that is like when you're on your back, you start pushing up your arm, just reach to that far elbow. Super easy thing. Just pull it underneath you. It's kind of like what they call like when you're a table. Take one leg out, you fall down. Good ground and pound. Diniz, it's really hard to grasp his skills because he gets guys out of there pretty quick. He's a good striker. He fights out of both stances. He's technically sound on the feet. Though he doesn't have the best deal, he does, lacks head movement and stuff, but good offense, marches down his foe. It's accurate. He's got really big power. I mean, he got 7 wins by TKO. I haven't seen too much of his offensive, defensive wrestling. I've seen briefly seen him get on the ground, but mostly it's on the feet and he's starching guys. So that's another reason, because I think Diniz is such an unknown. And I know this is a step up in competition. He's taking on some tomato cans along the way. But I'm just surprised. Like again, I might get some jobs in the MMA. Setting the lines will never be it because I know I think every fight should be closer than it is. Again, it's hard to know what you're gonna get with Diniz on the ground. I haven't seen too much of it, but I have seen Williams on the ground, and it would be really dumb of Williams to stand with Diniz. I don't think Williams is dumb. I expect Williams to turn this into a wrestling match. I think Williams would get the fight to the ground over and over again. I think Williams going to land some big strikes from on top. I think eventually he gets a TKO from ground and pound. I'll say he does in the 3rd round. Give me Williams by 3rd round TKO.
Yeah, I'm with you basically from top to bottom there. And I've been pleasantly surprised by Williams as well. I was on record as not being a believer in him, even as he started winning fights in the UFC. I mean, I think I picked him to beat Dresky and Sherman in his first 2 UFC fights, even saying I don't believe in Karl Williams. I just think he's better than maybe the 2 worst heavyweights in the UFC at the time. I've come around. He is, as you say, he's a little undersized for a heavyweight, but has kept like good body composition for a guy that used to fight at light heavyweight, has kept some of that athleticism and nimbleness. His boxing has remained effective. He has good hand speed for a heavyweight, and his wrestling, as you mentioned, very solid. Probably his best weapon at this level. I think he could do well in a stand-up battle with Diniz, but as you pointed out, he should have an advantage in the wrestling. So why even mess around too long on the feet, where the only thing I'm sure Diniz probably does better is single strike power. Like, why leave yourself out there like that? And you mentioned that Diniz has a history of finishing his opponents super fast. His last fight, his fight with Austin Lane, was his first career fight to go past the 1st round. And it doesn't really tell us much about his gas tank because it was one-way traffic the whole time. If he has to go through a 1st round of getting taken down a couple times by Williams, having to fight back to his feet with 250 pounds of himself and 245 pounds of Williams on his back, we may learn things about him. So I favor Williams here as well. And I'm going to say Williams pours it on, fights a smart fight, but as Diniz maybe starts to flag later in the fight, turns it up a little bit and gets the finish. Give me Williams by a 3rd round TKO on the ground. Women's bantamweights take the cage next as Karl Rosa faces Pannie Kianzad. Rosa, the 29-year-old Brazilian, is 17-6 overall. She is 6-3 in the UFC, where after arriving with a bit of a splash, winning her first 4 fights in the octagon as maybe Parna Valetudo's hottest new star, she has alternated wins and losses over the last couple of years. She is coming in off a loss. She dropped a unanimous decision to Irene Aldana at UFC 296 last December. This is her first fight of the year for 2024. She's at a new gym. She's turning over a new leaf. She's got to get past Kianzad to get off on the right foot. Kianzad, 32-year-old Swede, is 16-8 overall. She is 5-5 since joining the UFC as a veteran and featherweight finalist of season 28 of The Ultimate Fighter. She is coming into this fight on a 2-fight losing streak. Fought most recently at UFC Fight Night Tuivasa versus Tybura back in March, where she got tapped out in the 1st round by Macy Chasson in a near exact rerun of her first fight with Chasson on Tough. She is an underdog here, perhaps unsurprisingly. Rosa's minus 180, Kianzad plus 150. I'm starting to wonder whether Pannie Kianzad is shot. And I don't know what a shot Pannie Kianzad looks like, because the thing is, she's only 32. She's in a division where people like Sarah McMahon and Marion Renault have literally been relevant and competent past their 40th birthday. And then on top of that, Kianzad has a game that never really ran on fast twitch athleticism, and just ethnically being Persian, she's got a little of that thing where she doesn't look any older than she did 8 years ago. So I don't know what it looks like if Pannie Kianzad is shot, but the things, like the places where she used to be solid and reliable, like the clinch, scrambles, the ground, all of a sudden she's a step behind, at of the better women in the division. I always felt as though she was kind of a solid top 10 fighter, but her last couple of losses, Pennington, Vieira, Chasson, they're all top 5 fighters, but just Kianzad was never really in any of those fights. She's diminishing just incrementally, is I guess the best way to put it. Assuming Rosa is even the same fighter she was in the Aldana fight, I do favor her in this, and who knows, moving to a new camp may rejuvenate her. Rosa, she's big and strong for the division. I mean, she's a woman that I'm frankly surprised has been able to stay at 135 after the UFC ditched the 145-pound division. She doesn't have the same kind of fast twitch athleticism as the other PRVT women that kind of carried the flag for them did. People like Jessica Andrade, obviously, but very strong and made that work for her as just kind of a grinder. I just see her as somebody that's gonna kind of bully Kianzad around in a terrible fight. Like, Kianzad is a good, pretty slick boxer on the feet, but I think Rosa is just going to crowd her, make her move backwards, make her uncomfortable, probably force clinches against the fence, which for most of Kianzad's career have been a place where she can thrive, but I'm not sure she will against Rosa. Just Rosa's going to be bigger, stronger, may have a better gas tank at this point. I could see Rosa just mauling her in the clinch or getting takedowns from there and going to work from top position. Yeah. Give me Rosa to win kind of a grindy, slow fight to watch, but not a whole lot of suspense. I expect Rosa will probably win all 3 rounds.
Yeah. I love what you said. I think she might be a shot fighter. And you're like, I don't know what a shot fight for Kianzad is. I'm like, what does a prime Kianzad look like? What is that?
Yeah,
is there much difference? Yeah, I mean, Rosa, she's really big for the weight class. She's not a great athlete. She'll struggle with faster fighters like Norma Dumont was someone she really struggled with the speed. That's because Karol Rosa's she's flat-footed. She stands a little too tall for my liking. She does have good volume, though. I mean, she works behind a good jab, attacks with combinations, basic 1-2s. She can get a little wild at times and wing her overhand right and telegraph her power shots. She does have some pop, though, she lands. I like when she throws combinations and ends with kicks. Kicks are a big part of the game, especially calf kicks. I mean, she beat up Vanessa Miller with calf kicks, Jocelyn Edwards, Betchka Heda. A fight that she lost against Irene Aldana, she kicked her leg like 1 billion times, 1,000 billion times or something. It was, she was hurt to the body in that fight, and that might have been the difference. But she's super tough. Like, she's mentally tough to get through that and make it a close fight. She uses her size well in the clinch. I mean, she beat Betchka Heda up in the clinch. She likes to wrestle. Not the best defensive wrestler, but she gets on top. She's got a good top game, busy ground and pound. Definitely a top side grappler. Like, I go back to what she was like when against Sarah McMahon. She struggled to get off the bottom. Kianzad, she's also big. I mean, former featherweight. She's big for the weight class. I think I'm higher on her striking than you are. She's a pressure striker, good volume. I like her boxing, fast hands. She keeps everything tight. Nice crisp jab. I'd say some underrated power. I like her calf kicks that she throws to end her combinations. But I mean, I know I say this, seem like I say it to everyone. She has a lot of defensive issues. Because she constantly is taking ground, she kind of walks into shots, and it doesn't help that she doesn't move her head. She will use her size in battle and clinch and grind her opponents. The problem is she isn't much of an offensive wrestler, and she's actually a weaker defensive wrestler, and she struggles to get back to the feet and struggles to get back up, and she also struggles just in the overall grappling. I mean, she was easily subbed against Mr. Sasan in the last fight. So I think Kianzad is a little underrated striker just because of her volume and stuff. And I think she will have the speed advantage. The problem is, like, she will have volume, but Host's volume is even better. And you add in those kicks. I just expect her to kick Kianzad over and over again. Add in some takedowns. Add in Pannie Kianzad likes to work in the clinch, but that's like Host is just a brute. She can get in there and work in there. So I just think I see it very similar. I think it's just gonna be a Host fight. Give me Host by decision.
Next up, welterweights take the cage as Danny Barlow looks to stay undefeated against the debuting Nikolay Veretennikov. Barlow, the 29-year-old Tennessean, is 8-0 overall. He is 1-0 since joining the UFC out of season 7 of Dana White's Contender Series. He made his UFC debut back in February at UFC 298, knocking out Josh Quinlan in the 3rd round. So he'll look to keep his overall and UFC records perfect. He had been scheduled to take on Uros Medic. Medic was forced to withdraw from the card. In steps Veretennikov. 34-year-old Kazakhstani, now by way of California, used to be by way of Texas, is 12-4 overall. He fought on the Contender Series almost 3 years ago, dropping a unanimous decision to Michael Morales. Obviously wasn't signed off the loss. He has gone on to win 3 straight fights since then. That was good enough to get him the call-up for this short notice debut. He was also a former Fury FC welterweight champ. Stepping in here, perhaps unsurprisingly, given the late notice and the undefeated opponent, Veretennikov is another big underdog. Barlow's -300, Veretennikov +240. I've seen a lot of Nikolay Veretennikov's fights. And while, spoiler, I do favor Barlow in this, Veretennikov belongs in the UFC. He's a guy that I've been surprised that it's taken him this long to get there. He's from Kazakhstan. He started his career 1-3 over in the CIS, fighting in Russia, Ukraine. He took almost 2 years off, moved to Texas, and he was a transformed man. Like, since relocating his training to the US, he is effectively 11-1, and the one loss was a competitive decision loss to Michael Morales, who, by the way, is still undefeated, is 4-0 in the UFC, and has been wrecking shop. You can argue that Veretennikov gave Morales a tougher test than anyone he's fought in the UFC, and that includes people like Trevin Giles, who are damn good fighters. Veretennikov, he is a kung fu, wushu, sanda type fighter. You can see it the way he stands. He's not quite as crazy on the spinning stuff as, say, Muslim Salikov or Alexander Shlemenko, but he has a little bit of it in his game. Fast hands, throws a nice variety of kicks. He is a short, compactly built 170-pounder, and while wrestling is not his first choice, he is capable of wrestling. He's a good defensive wrestler. You can tell that Veretennikov's ideal fight consists of him, piecing up his opponent with sanda kicks and reverse punches and stuff while no selling their takedowns. But he's mean against the cage. People have traditionally tried to crowd him, clinch him, get him against the fence, and he's good either just punishing them from there or reversing the position, shucking them off, and going back to work. I think he's going to be a solid addition to the UFC's welterweight division. I think he's going to make some noise there. It's a bummer that he's already, going to be 35 later this year. Again, he's somebody that I thought might have gotten signed by the UFC even before the Contender Series, just after he won the Fury welterweight title in such dominant fashion. The good news here is that he's taking on someone in Barlow that we're probably going to get a pretty dynamite fight. Barlow is a striker by preference as well. He's long and rangy. Keith will have, kind of better X's and O's on that than me, but he's a guy with fast hands, good power. He looks slick defensively. I can't speak intelligently on all of his defensive habits, but he's a guy that just, seems to slip a lot of what's coming his way and then come back with accurate punches and kicks. If these guys were facing each other on full camps, I'd be more tempted to pick the upset here, but knowing that Veretennikov is stepping in on just a couple weeks notice, even if he's competitive early on, I would expect Barlow to grow from round to round. His win over Quinlan was kind of an eye-opener that way, where he was just fine pouring it on a foe where he didn't finish it in the first round. So give me Barlow to win a decision here over Veretennikov. Probably going to be a dynamite fight. Fingers crossed that it is. But yeah, give me Barlow to stay undefeated.
Yeah, this is a fun fight. This is one I'm looking forward to a lot. Obviously, Veretennikov being the, crafty veteran and Barlow being obviously the hot prospect. I'm intrigued by how this goes. Barlow looks sensational against Josh Quinlan. He's a long, lengthy fighter. He's got a 79-inch reach, great athlete. He's a southpaw, but really, he'll flow back and forth with both stances, very fluid in his movement. Dude's fast, accurate. I love his straight left. His nickname, left hand to God. It's there. He's got a nice step back left hand too that he does. He has serious power. He will hang his hands low, which I'm not very fond of. But he loves using his athleticism. Like, he was going for flying knees to the solar plexus. He went for flying knee a lot against Josh Quinlan. He uses that to kind of keep his range, tries to, almost intimidate his opponents with it, or just kind of keep them at distance so they don't try to jump in. He can wrestle a little bit. He'll sneak in a takedown. It's more secondary for him, just to kind of keep his opponents honest. Not much of his, I haven't seen too much of his submission grappling or anything. Veretennikov, 34 years old, which you don't like, but the dude has some good regional wins. I agree with you. I think he is a solid addition. I go back to the Anthony Ivy fight. It was a couple of years ago, but that's a fight that really aged well.
Ivy's on a 6-fight win streak now. He just killed somebody at PFL.
Yeah, he just beat Jaleel Willis.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Wills or whatever his name is. The guy he's been in Contender Series stuff. You know what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. So things I don't like. He's not the best athlete. He's a little flat-footed, kind of plodding, but he does march down his foe. He's got decent pocket. He's a patient striker, just kind of waiting for moments to explode. I like his his short, tight, straight right. He's got a good left hook. He's got good power. He's got 9 TKOs. I say he's an okay wrestler at best, and his defensive wrestling is okay. He hasn't faced stud wrestlers. And he only has 1 submission in his career. That's not really his game, which is, for a guy who has many fights as he has, you'd hope he'd have that at this point. Veretennikov, I know I'm butchering his last name. I apologize. He's a tough veteran, solid addition to the UFC, but Barlow is this legit, next level prospect. Really good striking, long, rangy. I say he puts on a show. I'm gonna say he puts on a really good performance. I'm gonna say he wins by first round knockout. Give me Barlow first round knockout.
Next up at UFC Vegas 95, and what is likely either to be the top prelim or the main card opener, not that it matters since it's all on the same channel, is a bantamweight matchup between Toshiomi Kazama and Pampos Grigoriou. Kazama, the 27-year-old from Japan, is 10-4 overall. I guess he's 0-2 in the UFC. I still am not completely up on when the UFC counts tough or road to UFC fights versus when they don't. But effectively,
it's like this. Let me help you. If we like the guy, we don't count the loss. Yeah, if we like the guy and he wins, we count that. If we don't like the guy, we'll count it the loss against them. And if we don't like him and he wins, we don't count it. So that's how it goes.
That works for me. All right, yeah, that sounds fair.
So do you like him? That's the question, man.
Well, in this fight, maybe not. At any rate, he was a bantamweight finalist at Road to UFC, so he made his debut on the Lewis versus Spivak card last February, got knocked out in like 30 seconds by Rinya Nakamura, came back last August at UFC Fight Night Holloway versus Korean Zombie, got knocked out in the first round again, this time by Garrett Armfield. He is hoping not to make it 3 for 3, I'm sure, against Grigoriou. Grigoriou, 32-year-old Cypriot by way of Long Island, is 8-4 overall. He's 0-1 since joining the UFC out of season 7 of Dana White's Contender Series. He knocked out Cameron Smotherman on the Contender Series a little under a year ago, made his debut in the UFC in March at the Tuivasa versus Tybura Fight Night, dropping a unanimous decision to Chad Anheliger. So he's looking to get his first UFC win. He is comfortably favored to do so. Grigoriou minus 210, Kazama plus 170. I mean, we've got a guy that's 0-2 in the UFC, got a guy that's 0-1 in the UFC. I feel as though both of them are better than that record, but beyond that, this is bantamweight. If you ask me if anybody's a future top 15 fighter, my default answer is probably going to be no. Tell me if I'm wrong here, if you see serious upside in either guy, and tell me who you think wins on Saturday.
Yeah, real quick. I don't know if you guys can hear that. I have like an AC right next to me. It's 9 million degrees in here. So I figured people don't want me taking my shirt off. So if you could hear that, I apologize. I know it can be loud sometimes. I mean, if he
takes his shirt off, find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or the audio platform of your choice.
No, man. If I take my shirt off, we'll put this on OnlyFans. Let's get the money up. I mean, Kazama, he looked terrible so far in the UFC. I mean, Garrett Armfield just smoked him. Prior to his run in the UFC, he was a pressure striker that kind of wanted a brawl, throws a lot of looping power shots. He does sit on his punches. He hits hard, I'll say that. The problem is he might favor a brawl, but his body doesn't. He doesn't, he doesn't have the best durability. I mean, dude's taking a lot of damage just because he doesn't move his head. He got knocked out back-to-back fights in the first round, which is obviously not good. He can grapple. I mean, he's got a judo background. Look at him. He's a ripped guy. He's a very physically strong guy. He got some upper body takedowns. He has some trips inside. He also has some entries from the outside. Good at winning scrambles. I've seen him pull guard and try to sweep. I wouldn't suggest that in the UFC, but he's done it before. Once on top, he's got a good top game. Like, I like the way he slowly inches. He controls the legs. He'll Dagestani handcuff. As he laces the legs. He is a submission threat. He's got 5 subs on his record, and he's got good cardio. Like, the fights I've seen him, he's gone deep. Grigoriou, he's a pocket boxer. He throws hard. He also throws a lot of winging shots. Tends to kind of put everything into his shots. And he'll even really overthrow shots, which leaves him open to counters. He'll throw some spinning attacks. He had no answer to Chad Anheliger's leg kicks. Just one after another, just beat the hell out of his legs. He can wrestle. Not as powerful wrestler, but he'll close the distance, work in the clinch and grind. Concern besides his legs giving away on him against Anheliger, he also gassed in that fight. I'm sure that was a UFC debut in a big moment. Did he take that fight? Did you say he took that fight on short notice?
I didn't say, but he did.
He did. Okay, I thought so. Yeah. I thought I remember that when I was rewatching that fight. Dude, I'm not high on either. you said that that they're better than their records. I mean they're 0-3 combined. So I guess I just think both guys are bottom of the barrel for UFC. Obviously I'm talking about UFC, not in the world. I'm having a hard time making a pick. You said Grigoriou was a slight favorite?
No, he's a big favorite, minus 210.
Oh, shit. Sorry. I'm going with the upset, dude. The one thing I know is Kazama has a better gas tank. like when I look at these two guys, I've seen Kazama go hard. I'm gonna say that's different. Give me Kazama by split decision.
Man, I like the ballsy upset pick there because, and if you've watched our show before, you've heard me say this. Whenever I'm looking at somebody who's a significant favorite, I will usually start by asking myself, okay, if we get the upset, how do we get there? What does it look like? You can see that here. We get a wild first round where both these guys are just swinging wildly in the pocket. If we're being honest, a little overthrowing on everything. Miraculously, nobody gets knocked out, and Grigoriou's already breathing hard on the stool at the end of the first round. And 135 pounds is not a division that tolerates bad gas tanks. So I can totally see the upset and how we would get there. Just, I think if we get that wild brawl in the first round, I don't know if Kazama makes it through. And maybe that's just because I'm coming to it on the back of seeing him get face planted in back-to-back fights, but he gets a pass on the Nakamura fight because Nakamura, one, is obviously a sensational wrestler, so Kazama probably didn't have any choice but to stand and bang with him if Nakamura wanted that. And then on top of that, Nakamura's a harder hitter. Like, he's a muscular little wrestle boxer guy. The Armfield one is a little worse because that was more protracted, and Armfield exposed his defensive issues multiple times. If this gets to the end of the first round, Keith is right and I'm wrong, but I'm picking it not to get to the end of the first round. Give me Pampas Grigoriou to continue the streak of misery for Toshiomi Kazama with a first round knockout. And while neither of us apparently think that either of these guys is future top 15 material, I will say that the UFC is a more fun place the more fighters from Long Island are in it. That's when, like, so many immortal moments, you know, you get Matt Serra yelling Marab in the corner. You get Ray Longo telling Chris Weidman to punch a fucking hole through his chest. The more Long Island accents.
Yeah. Chris Weidman's dad saying, he's still my boy. Like we all thought you could disown your kid because he lost the title. like all Long Island. That's what happens in Long Island. I don't know if you know that, Ben. I know you're not an East Coast guy like I am. But that's what happens in Long Island. You do something wrong, dad disowns you always. Lose a match, strike out, something disowned.
For the record, I grew up on the East Coast. Apparently, if that was true, my dad would have disowned me because I was at best an above average wrestler in high school.
So I want to correct something real quick on the record. You said that both of us don't view them as top 15. Yeah, but you actually view them as a top 5 fighter, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yep. We head now to the men's flyweight division and a clash between Allan Nascimento and Jafel Filho. Nascimento, the 32-year-old Brazilian, is 20-6 overall. He's 2-1 since joining the UFC as a veteran of Dana White's Contender Series Brazil. He actually lost on the Contender Series, lost to Rauli and Paiva. He got the call-up like 1 or 2 fights later. Since then, 2-1 in the UFC. He dropped his debut by split decision to Tagir Ulanbekov, which in hindsight, not that bad. And since then, he has back-to-back wins over Jake Hadley and Carlos Hernandez. That's the good news. The bad news is that Nascimento has literally been a once-a-year fighter in the UFC. He's fought once in 2021, once in 2022, once in 2023, and this is his first fight of 2024. But nonetheless, going for his 3rd straight win, he'll have to get past Filho. 31-year-old, also from Brazil, 16-3 overall, also 2-1 in the UFC, also won back-to-back fights after dropping his debut. He won on the Contender Series almost 2 years ago. Got tapped out in the 3rd round by Muhammad Mokaev in his UFC debut. That was just another of Mokaev's interesting / controversial fights in the UFC. I'm sure one of us will talk more about that later, but he ended up tapping out late in the 3rd round. Since then, he has first-round submissions over Daniel Perez and Ode Osborne. The most recent of those, the Osborne fight, was back in March at UFC Fight Night, Tuivasa versus Tybura. Odds here favor Nascimento and favor him pretty strongly. He is -205, Filho +170 coming back. Keith, these are both guys that I didn't think too much of when they joined the UFC. I mean, They were both a little older than you'd like. Decent regional outcomes, but nothing to suggest that they'd be standouts. But both of them have looked pretty good. Tell me whether you agree with that, and tell me who you think gets it done on Saturday.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think both guys have been looking really good, and the winner of this one, I think, will be someone that'll get a lot of buzz in that division. And this is a good one. I mean, Nascimento, he's really big for the division. Long, lengthy guy, a kickboxer that's pretty technically sound, clean clean boxing, throw 1-2s down the pipe. He's got that like tall man's power where he connects and he hurts guys. Really, really big kicking game. Kicks everywhere. To high kicks, calf kicks. Uses his size well in the clinch. I've talked about before. Like my favorite thing about his length is the way he frames. He uses it really good to land elbows inside, knees inside. He can wrestle. He's good at shooting when his opponent tries to, get past his range and close the distance. So he wants to go he's staying on the outside, staying outside. The guy comes in close. He's on his hips, taking him down. Though he isn't like the most technical wrestler, but he's a very good grappler. Uses his really long legs. He's flexible. He's got 15 subs on his record. I've seen him get subs everywhere. If you put him on his back, he's active while they're just hips constantly moving. Loves subs off his back, tosses up triangles with those long legs. He'll go for like heel hooks and leg locks, though. I'm always not the favorite of that. But my one concern is if you put him against his back, he doesn't really look to sweep or escape. He plays jiu-jitsu. Fialho, this guy has faced some tough guys so far in the UFC. He's really looked good. I mean, he's a decent boxer who sets up his shots well with feints. Though he doesn't have the best output, he's one of these guys who kind of lulls and I always say Yoel Romero's style, lulls, and then suddenly explodes with a combination. I like that he mixes up like his attacks high and low. Throws a lot of kicks, but he'll often throw them naked leg kicks, which is concerning. Due to his like heavy base style, they throw hard. He's open to kicks himself. Getting his legs kicked out himself. He will close the distance and grind in the clinch, which I like. For his style, he'll look for takedowns. He doesn't have the best wrestling skills, kind of similar to how I described Nascimento. Like they look for to get the fight to the ground, but not the best at it. He actually gets a lot of his takedowns from inside the clinch with like body locks. He also has, actually his best one is probably a slide by, getting close to the head, like a slide by to try to get to the back. He's got fast back takes. He's a really good submission artist. I think he's got 8 subs. I mean, he quickly subbed O'Day Osborne.
He's up to 10 now. Yeah, because he's got 2 more in the UFC. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I should update my notes. I mean, I know you believe that he tapped. A lot of people believe he subbed Muhammad Mokaev for the knee bar. And
that's the thing. Like a more nervous ref might have just stopped that fight right there, and Mokaev would have complained, and they might have rematched. But
yeah, and I'll say this: I didn't think Mokaev tapped when I first watched the fight, but based on the bullshit that the guy's been pulling, he might have. It doesn't surprise me now, But also, if he doesn't get a submission, he's got good ground and pound. I love this matchup. You asked me before the show what my favorite matchup was, and I said Basharat Gutierrez. Break it on this fight now. I might have changed my mind. Like Nascimento Fialho, this is a hot matchup. Not there by the sea to have to take my shirt off hot, but pretty close. I flip-flopped. I like both guys. A big part of Nascimento's game is his grappling, and that's something he won't have. I don't think he'll have an advantage over Fialho, or even if he, at best, it's even. Like I don't think he has an advantage. That said, I think Nascimento still has more avenues for victory. He does. I think he still has the advantage on the feet if he can, keep his distance. Work from the outside. He can still, get a takedown himself. But I think he might get taken down and he'll do enough to survive and get back to his feet. Well, hopefully he gets back to, he doesn't play jiu-jitsu too much, but maybe, uses some jiu-jitsu skills to kind of maybe create a scramble. Once on the feet, though, I think he can pick up the volume. I don't have a lot of confidence in this pick. This is one of these ones I'm more excited to watch the fight than break it down, but give me Nascimento I'll say by decision.
Yeah, I like the breakdown there. Both these guys have been interesting additions to the UFC. Like they've been surprisingly successful. They both stepped right in and lost their debuts to very good fighters in very close fights. And then since then, they've been beating pretty good fighters. And I'm with you. I feel as though this is a pretty even matchup, and I could see their grappling. I mean, not entirely canceling out, but neither guy having a huge advantage over the other. And that being the case, it comes back to something that you very astutely mentioned. Filho will sometimes get into a mode where he doesn't throw much volume. And it might come down to that. If neither guy really puts the other in peril on the ground, if neither really hurts the other on the feet, Filho he doesn't throw enough volume for me to feel comfortable with him swaying the judges in close rounds. And that's what kind of hurts the otherwise interesting upset potential here. So give me Nascimento by decision as well. I wouldn't be shocked if Filho wins this fight. Not at all. These are both very good fighters. They both have a future in this division, but I like Nascimento in this one to win 2 rounds out of 3. Next up on the UFC Vegas 95 main card is a women's bantamweight matchup between Yana Santos and Chelsea Chandler. Santos, the 34-year-old Russian, formerly known as Yana Kunitskaya, is 14-8 with 1 no contest overall. She is 4-5 since joining the UFC as a former bantamweight title challenger in Invicta. She debuted as a sacrificial lamb for then featherweight champ Chris Cyborg. That was 2018, the year that the UFC essentially gutted Invicta's 135-pound division to provide live bodies for Cyborg to beat up. Since then, though, she was a high-level contender in the UFC women's bantamweight division for a while before falling on hard times over the last couple of years. She is on a 3-fight losing streak at this point, stretching back 3 full years, but fought most recently last July, dropping a split decision to Karl Rosa. That was at the Strickland versus Magomedov fight night. She's going to look to snap that streak, the only losing streak of her career, at the expense of Chandler. Chandler, 30-year-old from Stockton, is 6-2 overall. She is 2-1 since joining the UFC out of Invicta. She's coming in off a win. She took a unanimous decision over Josiane Nunes at the same Tuivasa versus Tybura fight night, where half the fighters on this card most recently appeared. That got her back on track after her first UFC loss, which was to Norma Dumont last July. Odds here, despite one fighter coming in off a win and the other coming in off 3 straight losses, your favorite is Santos. She's -145, Chandler +115. I mean, Keith, when a woman is on a 3-fight losing streak and she's a favorite, I mean, that says something about the level of, public faith in the 2 fighters. But where the UFC, even just by booking this fight, is expressing its faith that something is going to happen that we've never seen before, and that is Chandler fighting at bantamweight in the UFC. Her first 3 fights in the UFC have been at 140 pounds, 145 pounds, and 137 pounds. The 140-pound catch weight was planned. The 145-pound bout with Norma Dumont was sort of planned. The 137-pound fight against Josie Nunes was just Chandler blowing weight. So Chandler has yet to make the actual bantamweight limit in the UFC. The greater problem for me is that on weight, off weight, in Invicta before she got to the UFC, I don't think she's that good. And she's not the kind of fighter you would expect with, the Chick Diaz nickname and the Stockton origins, the Cesar Gracie gym affiliation. She's not terribly athletic. She is big. I mean, obviously she's big for a bantamweight. She blows weight. She's a good grappler, but she's a good grappler when she's the bully, when she's the initiator, when she's the one that gets the takedown, sets up shop on top. You're not going to see any Diaz brother style triangle chokes from her back, flipping the bird at the cameras. On the feet, I'd say she's an average boxer at best. She has decent power, but her hands aren't terribly fast. And for one of the bigger women in the division, just doesn't make very good use of what reach advantage she may or may not have. Unless Santos is just totally checked out at this point, just totally mailing it in. I mean, I think she and Thiago Santos have 2 kids at this point. They've been happily married for years. Santos is on the verge of retirement. He may have retired after his losses in PFL. If she already has her eye on whatever's next in her life and she's just cashing one last check, Chandler could absolutely manhandle her. Santos, while I think she's a better, more skilled fighter than Chandler, she's also another one that does best when she's physically stronger, when she's the bully, when she's the one that can boss the other around in the clinch or decide to strike at range when she has the advantage there. But if Santos is even the version of herself that's been losing to people like Rosa and Holly Holman and Rainey Aldana, I think she's better than Chandler. Chandler just hasn't shown much since she's been in the UFC in her wins or her losses. Give me Santos, who I'm actually kind of surprised is only 34. I expected her to be older, but give me Santos to put on a vintage performance, if we want to call it that, snap the 3-fight losing streak and win a decision over Chandler in a fight that may have Chandler on the UFC's cut list, if not ours.
Kind of a weird matchup, this one. They're Yana Santos. I mean, she's a big woman for the weight class too. We talk about Chandler missing the weight. Not that, I mean, Santos is a professional. Like, I don't expect her to miss weight, but I'm just saying that she's big. When we've seen her at her best, she's had good output on the feet, fighting behind the hard guard defense, very long, straight shots from the outside. Does her best as an outfighter. She doesn't like being pressured, though. I go back to like Aspen Ladd and Marion Renault. They both had who not as skilled as Yana Santos, still had a lot of success by forcing her on her back foot. She likes spinning attacks, which I, she's not the best at. Kicks are probably the best part of her striking. Just throw those long range kicks. In the mid range, she starts looking for slicing elbows, which I like. She's a good clinch fighter because she's very physically strong. Will grind against the clinch. Though she was out muscled by Holly Holm in the clinch. Actually, it was pretty even in the clinch. She'll throw a lot of knees to the body and legs, which I like. Not a great offensive wrestler, but if she gets on top, she does have some good control. And if you take her down, she's hard to hold down. She's got a good wizard to take down, to avoid takedowns. But I'd say she's. I'm sorry, I said she's hard to hold down. She's not hard. If she gets her down, you can hold her down because like Aspen Ladd and Holly Holm both kept her down for large portions of that fight. Chandler, I mean, she's obviously huge for the weight class, but like you mentioned, she's even bigger when she doesn't make weight. I mean, poor Josie Nunez is already small for the weight class that it is, and you had Chandler missing weight. I mean, she is exactly what you described. She's a big, thick woman. I don't mean that in an insulting way, but
no, she's
a southpaw with good output on the feet. Throws straight shots down the pipe. She loves her overhand left. She does hit hard. I'll say that because she's big. The problem is, I think I like her offense striking better than you do. It's her defense striking. She likes head movement. She will close the distance and just use her size and clinch. She has no problem with just slow, grueling, grinding, almost like heavyweight MMA affair where they're in close in the clinch. She likes body lock takedowns. She's super strong. If she gets to fight to the ground, a good cop game. Underrated grappler. I shouldn't say underrated grappler. She does train with the Diaz brothers, but like she's a good grappler. Some good back takes, hard ground and pound. But we take that defense. I mean, she got taken down by Norma Dumont and just struggled to get back up. This is a big step up in competition for Chandler. And if Santos was in her prime, I think it's an easy one for Santos. I agree with you. Who the big question to me is like I expect to see a lot of clinching. Like who's gonna have the advantage of that? Because like you said, they're almost mirror images of them in that area where they both like to be the bully inside the clinch. You know what? You talked about the motivation and That's a big thing that I keep thinking about too. Is we haven't seen yet. She's on a losing streak, but she lost to good fighters. We haven't seen her look terrible. But when you're on a losing streak, you've had kids, your husband's struggling. Is MMA closing, or maybe they'll open a gym or something. Like go that route. Does she have that motivation? I'm gonna go the opposite, man. I'm gonna say Chandler does it. I'm gonna say she's gonna be too strong. I think she's gonna win the clinch game. Maybe even get a takedown. Surprise everyone, get a takedown. Give me Chandler. I'll say she was by split decision.
We head now to the featherweight division for a matchup between Damon Jackson and Jose Mariscal. Jackson, the 35-year-old Texan, is 23-6-1 with one no contest overall. He's 5-4-1 with one no contest across two separate stints in the UFC. He's 5-3 this time, and he's coming in off a win. In his most recent appearance back in April, he snapped a two-fight losing streak by taking a split decision over Alexander Hernandez. So he will look to continue a winning streak here against Mariscal. Mariscal, 31-year-old Illinois native fighting out of Denver, is 16-6 with one no contest overall. He is 3-0 in the UFC, 2-0 at featherweight. He made a short notice debut up a weight class and upset Trevor Peek in his debut a little over a year ago. Since then, he's dropped back down to 145 pounds, and he has wins over Jack Jenkins and Morgan Charriere. The most recent of those, the Charriere fight, was back in April at UFC Fight Night, Allan versus Curtis 2. So Mariscal will look to make it 4-0 in the UFC, kind of continue to announce his surprising presence. He is comfortably favored to get it done. Mariscal is minus 250, Jackson plus 200. Keith, both these guys are pleasant surprises to a certain extent. Jackson on a more modest level. He looked in his first run like he didn't really belong in the UFC. And since he's been back, at the very least, you would have to say he belongs. Whereas Mariscal came out of nowhere, and all of a sudden he's 3-0 in two of the better divisions in the whole promotion. Tell me who you like in this fight and how you see it playing out.
Yes. So one thing I love, we have these certain type of fighters that are just like, not the greatest fighters, but just our kind of guys, with Jackson being one of them. I just
always overachievers.
Yeah, and I just love that no matter what, they're always underdogs. And like I had no idea what the line was going to be on this fight. I thought it'd be close to a pick 'em or something like that. And of course, Jackson is this 2-1 underdog. Mariscal is fun, man. Like I've said this before, like for a guy, he came in he wasn't a guy in the regional scene that you thought a lot about. Like he might make UFC one day, and that's like the peak. But that, like, all those losses and run on the regional scene just gave this guy a lot of experience. I mean, he's fought a lot of good guys. He's good, and you see him peaking at the right time when he joined the UFC. He's a guy who can fight on both stances, fights with a lot of pressure, great volume. He'll throw some spinning attacks. He leaps into his punches to land hard shots, and he throws a hard. It can be a wild man. He throws hard winging punches. He wants a brawl. He's a tough dude. I mean, the guy's got like a dog in him. He's on the gas, and he's not letting up. Mixes punches and kicks well together. Good kicking game. Good at chopping at his opponent's legs. Closes the distance and does well. Chest to chest, dirty boxing. He's a judo. He's got a judo background, so he can throw some trips and stuff in there. But he will wrestle, and he'll wrestle a lot. Good entries on the outside. He also likes some upper body takedowns. He's got those judo throws too. Gets on top, mean ground and pound. He can be a little like thinking about trying to do damage instead of controlling because he'll lose position in wild scrambles. But he's fun. Like he'll roll underneath for subs, like locks and stuff that really doesn't work in the UFC. But he's got 3 submission wins in his career. Jackson, I mean, he's a long, lengthy fighter himself. He's also insanely tough. That won't stop coming, nonstop pressure. He does well. Like he pressures, but he pressures from a distance where he can throw his long range. He strikes. The problem is he doesn't care about defense. He stands tall with his chin high in the air. I mean, Dan Ige blasted him, knocked him out bad. Alex Hernandez, even in a win, dropped him early in the fight. He's got a good kick. Was it early or was it second round? I don't remember. He got dropped. I apologize if I said it early. He's got good success with his calf kicks against Hernandez. He throws a lot of naked leg kicks, which leaves him to open to shots. He also will wrestle a lot. He likes to drop down his opponent's hips when they press the action too much. Got some good entries. Like I always go back to the Charles Rosa fight, which he just like took him down 6 times. I mean, that was a while ago, but he ragdolled Dan Argueta. He took Alex Hernandez down 3 times in the last fight, so that's good. He's got a weak defensive wrestling. Now, I just said, going back to Charles Rosa, people be like, man, that was a long time ago. I keep bringing that up. I'm gonna go worse. I'm gonna go back to the Mercedes Bektik fight, where Bektik just took him made him into a takedown dummy, which is bad. He doesn't defend. He doesn't look to sprawl. He'll like grab a guillotine and he'll jump and he's very opportunistic. It puts him on his back a lot, but he does have a good guillotine. And he's an underrated grappler. Some slick submissions, good back takes. I love this fight. I mean, how can you not love this fight? Like these, let's be honest. Like even like Chevy's on this nice run, but the guy's not going to win a UFC title or anything like that. But this, like, he's going to always be in fun fights. And these are 2 guys. I think we have an absolute war. I hate doing this. I hate going against my boy, but I'm going to pick Chepe. Despite having the wrestling advantage on paper, Jackson gives up takedowns too easily. And I think that's what's going to give Chepe the advantage. I just think he's going to take Jackson down a lot. Add in that Chepe is probably the more durable fighter. Jackson's the one more likely to get hurt if there's a big moment. Give me Chepe by decision and just a fun fight of the night war.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to find any fault with that. Jackson is, he's one of the guys that we love, and they tend to be cut from a mold, like overachieving action fighters. Yeah, I mean, those are, hey, that's a thing of the past. Jackson has fixed that. I mean, he's got some new hair and he's looking quite excellent. Mariscal has been such a surprise since he got to the UFC because, he's a guy that had been around forever in the Midwest and occasionally in LFA, but he lost to some guys that didn't really pan out in the UFC either. I mean, his losses to people like Steve Garcia and Joe Anderson Brito have definitely aged well, but there was nothing to indicate this guy was going to jump in the UFC and go 3-0 in a little bit over a year. The win over Jack Jenkins, it ended on kind of a freakish arm injury as, they were in a scramble. Jenkins was trying to either stop the takedown or get back up and his elbow went the wrong way. But even by that point, Mariscal was starting to kind of pull even. Like Jenkins had definitely won the first round. Mariscal was on his way to winning the second already before Jenkins hurt himself. That's as encouraging as anything that has gone on, in his 3 fights in the UFC. I think Jenkins is probably the best fighter he's faced in the UFC, and he was at least pulling even with the guy. Jackson, he is what he is. He's gonna he's gonna be 36 by fight night. He turns 36 this week, and even when he was 26, he was not a plus athlete by the standards of the featherweight division. You mentioned his wrestling. The guy is a former college wrestler. I mean, his small college, I forget which one it is, but he's a guy that wrestled into college. And you're right. It's not just that he has iffy takedown defense. It's that he doesn't even try to defend the takedown a lot of times. He'll just kind of concede the takedown with or without a guillotine. His offensive wrestling is a little better, but still definitely more opportunistic than overpowering. I'm leaning towards the upset here, but I'm just thinking of the kind of minefield he's going to have to go through. He's going to have to get past a fighter that hits harder, is as good a wrestler, and is also proven to have enough gas to fight 3 rounds at a furious pace. Honestly, Jackson's best route to victory would be Mariscal making a bad enough mistake on the ground that Jackson either taps him out with a guillotine or, lands in mount and, beats the shit out of him for a round. And that ends up, making it 2 rounds to 1. much as I like Jackson, it is hard for me to envision that happening as well. It certainly could. Mariscal is at heart a wild fighter and an action fighter. You know what? Screw it. The Chepe Express, it's got to stop sooner or later. I'm going with our guy. Give me Jackson to win 2 rounds out of 3 in a front runner for fight of the night. And yeah, it's going to take Mariscal having some little miscue or mistake or getting tired in a way that we haven't seen him do yet in the UFC, and Jackson basically stealing around off the more skilled fighter. But all of Jackson's wins involve him stealing rounds off of more skilled fighters. So nothing new here. Give me Damon Jackson in the upset. That brings us to the co-main event of UFC on ESPN 61, a men's bantamweight matchup between Chris Gutierrez and Javid Basharat. Gutierrez, the 33-year-old Texan by way of Denver, is 26-2 overall. He is 8-3-1 in the UFC. He's coming in off a loss. He fought in the headliner of UFC Fight Night 233 last December, dropping a unanimous decision to Song Yadong. So he's going to look to get back in the win column here against Basharat, who will be doing the same. 28-year-old Afghani Brit, now by way of Las Vegas, is 14-1 with 1 no contest overall. That's the good news. The bad news is that the 1 loss and the 1 no contest have come in his last 2 fights. So he finds himself in need of rebuilding some momentum. He fought last October at UFC 294, was getting the better of a fight against Victor Henry before the thing ended just seconds into the second round off of a horrific accidental groin kick that rendered Henry unable to continue. He came back in March at the Rosenstrike versus Gaziev fight night, dropped a unanimous decision to Ayman Zahabi in a major upset. So again, Basharat looking to get back in the win column, looking to get his first uncontroversial win, first official win period in a year and a half. He is favored to do so, and strongly favored. Basharat is minus 250, Gutierrez plus 190.
Wow.
I said wow as well when I saw that. Here's the thing. I believe both Basharat brothers are the real deal. I think I've said probably twice already on this show that if you ask me name of debuting fighter X and ask me if they're a future top 15 fighter at 135, 145, 155, I'm almost always going to say no.
Sure. Just
by the nature of the divisions, not the fighter in question. But the Basharat brothers, Javid and Farid, are 2 where I'd give it even odds that they end up in the top 15 at some point.
Yeah.
And Basharat might be close with an uncontroversial win here. I mean, he's looked very good, and terrible groin shot aside, looks like he was going to beat Victor Henry before landing the nut shot. The loss to Zahabi is something interesting just because Zahabi managed to turn it into an Ayman Zahabi fight. Like, Basharat is used to dictating the pace in his fights, dictating the distance, being the one pushing things, stepping on the gas. He's used to being the quicker, the stronger fighter. He looked pedestrian enough against Zahabi that I wouldn't be surprised at all if that ends up just being a weird aberration. Like, I could see Basharat wins his next 6 fights, he gets a title shot, and we go back to, man, remember in 2024 when Ayman Zahabi just, stuck him in the mud for 3 rounds? I could see that being the case. I think that's almost more likely than us looking back and saying that Zahabi was the guy who, quote unquote, exposed Basharat. My feelings on this fight, like, I'm expecting Basharat to be back and to be very good. I'm just surprised that the line is what it is, because have these people not seen Chris Gutierrez fight? He is an outstanding fighter, and he's only lost really to outstanding fighters in the UFC. Like, who's he lost to? He's lost to the 2018 version of Hani Barcelos, which, by the way, happened to be his UFC debut, and then Pedro Munoz and Song Yadong. Like, Gutierrez has some of the best leg kicks in the entire UFC. Like, I would hate to be a bantamweight or featherweight in that gym and just have to deal with him and Jonathan Martinez every day. can't imagine that. But he has more than that to his striking game. For a guy who is actually kind of stocky and compact, he fights surprisingly long. I'm always surprised by the tail of the tape at how short he is and how short his reach is, because in a sport, in a promotion where we have so many tall fighters that don't fight tall, Gutierrez is a shorter guy who fights a pretty good outfight. And it probably stems a lot from his low kicks and a lot from his fast hands. He's good at punishing people for coming in, and he's good at punishing people for coming in and throwing just one strike. People who try to land, you know, a single leg kick or a single punch against him, he tends to punish them. I'm surprised that it is a 2-1 upset that I'm calling here, but even if Basharat isn't the guy who lost to Zahabi, if he's the guy that we saw up until that fight, I think Gutierrez may just be a better fighter. Give me Gutierrez to win a really, really good fight here. And I don't think it's going to be like Jackson versus Mariscal, where it's just wild, or like Kazama and Pampas Grigoriou, where it's probably going to be wild for as long as it goes. I expect this one to be more like a junior version of Sandhagen versus Nurmagomedov that we just saw, where it's close from 1 minute to the next, one round to the next, and just has that kind of tense feeling as two very skilled, very well coached fighters are making adjustments from round to round to each other. Give me Gutierrez to take 2 rounds off of Basharat, and just Basharat for the second fight in a row to kind of be put on his heels a little bit, just by the next upper level of fighters that he sort of ascended to after going undefeated in his first 14 fights.
Dude, if you told me that this line was 2-1 favorite, I would have been going on a rant being like, wow, everyone gave up on Basharat. How could he be a 2-1 underdog to Gutierrez? Like, Gutierrez is great, but man, you guys overacting at 1 loss. I wouldn't in my wildest dreams have a guy get his first career loss and then go against a higher ranked opponent, you know, who, and I think Zahabi is, I mean, he's got like the quietest win streak there is. But, you know, I do think it might be one of these losses early in your career that, you know, we look back on, you know, 5 years from now and go, oh man, when he lost that fight, I'm surprised. You know, I expected like Gutierrez to be like a -130 favorite. I'd be like, oh, okay, I get why he's a favorite. He's a ranked fighter, and you know, he's not, you know, he's not the guy coming off his first career loss, but they still view Basharat's skill. This is the opposite, man. They asleep on Gutierrez. I mean, Gutierrez, he's a good striker. I mean, nice output on the feet, technically sound, flows really well, uses movement to kind of get his opponents to guess and chase him and be out of position, and then he can land. The one issue and the one fight I thought he looked really bad was the Pedro Munoz fight, where he was getting trapped on his back foot. But generally speaking, he just flows really well. It just touches until there's an opening. You know, he's not the big power puncher. That's not his game. He's more like a cumulative fighter. But it's like a punishment, man. He's got draw attacks and counter with clean shots, nice jab. He's going to work the body, get his opponents guessing with a lot of variety. He's good at changing speeds, which I like. He'll throw one like combination faster, then he'll slow it down a little bit, kind of like a pitcher, you know, throw the fastball, then change up, then going back with the fastball with an opening. Good kicking game. I mean, I go back to that Vincent Morales fight where he finished him with leg kicks, just batters legs. You talked about just ruins people leg kicks, checks leg kicks himself, which I like. A beautiful step in knees. I mean, I just go back to like the Frankie Edgar fight. He doesn't look to wrestle much, and he's a weak defensive wrestler. Is the one thing that I think holds him back a little bit. I mean, I always go back to the Cody Durden fight. You know, it's you know, it's been a while now, but you know, Cody Durden proved that you know the best way to beat Gutierrez is take him down, hold him down, and then Song Yadong. You know, he struggled to get off the bottom against Song Yadong. Basharat, he's a really well-rounded fighter. You know, on the feet, good striker, moves well, very relaxed on the feet. Can fight out of both stances, very calculated striker. Though he can kind of be too patient at times and then not throw enough. And that was, you mentioned, against Zahabi was the case. He's got quick hands. He's accurate. Not a lot of tells in his strikes. Nice jab. Good at sliding in and out of range and landing shots. Attacks with combination. He's good at hand fighting and using it to get around his opponent's attacks. I love his body work. He has serious power, good kicking game. I like his teep kicks, his calf kicks. He also checks his opponent's kicks, which is great. Go back to like the Tony Gravely fight where he saw like beautiful step-in knees that he was laying on Gravely. He does need to clean up his defense a little bit. He carries his hands a little low, back straight up on the center line, keeps his chin too high for my liking. He also, like, against Zahabi, he was crashing the pocket, but keeping his hands down. And he was kind of getting beat to the punch as he was getting into the pocket. He's a good wrestler. I mean, like what he did to Tony Gravely, he was taking Tony Gravely down. Though he's not a traditional style of wrestling. He's more about like creating a scramble and winning it. He likes also getting, like, if you kick at him, he'll grab it. He'll reshoot as you're bringing the leg back or just catching the kick. He showed good takedown defense against Tony Gravely. One issue I had against the Zahabi fight, he abandoned his wrestling, and it probably cost him the fight. If he gets to fight the ground, he's got a good top game, likes to advance position. He's got mean ground and pound. He's got 6 sub wins, but he also faded in that Zahabi fight. This is a hard fight to pick. I'm glad you went with the underdog. I mean, Basharat has all the potential in the world. He really does. Like, if you talked about like being a top 15 guy, like looking at this entire card, if you said, hey, one guy that could win the UFC title, Basharat's the obvious choice. It's like there's no other choice. He did take a step back in his last fight, and then this is a step up. I mean, Gutierrez is a great fighter, great striking, mean kicking game. I think Basharat has to know his best chance to get back on track as a wrestler. He didn't do it against Zahabi. And I think he does it here. I think he grapples a lot. I think the grappling gets him back on track. I think he just turns into a grapple. I really wanted to take the upset and have a consensus upset pick. I don't think we have one yet. We both taking some upsets. We're just not on the same side. I say Basharat picks up the best one of his career. Makes everyone forget about that Zahabi loss. Give me Basharat by decision.
With that, we come to the main event of UFC on ESPN 61, a heavyweight matchup between top 15, top 10-ish contenders, Marcin Tybura and Sergey Spivak. Tybura, the 38-year-old Pole, is 25-8 overall. He's 13-7 in the UFC. He is coming in off a win. He choked Tai Tuivasa all the way to sleep back in March in the headliner of UFC Fight Night 239. That got him back on track after the dubious honor of being Tom Aspinall's comeback opponent last July. So he's looking to start a new win streak here. He'll need to get past Spivak in order to do so. Spivak, 29-year-old Moldovan, 16-4 overall, 7-4 in the UFC. He is coming in off a loss. He last fought last September in the headliner of UFC Fight Night 226, where he got knocked out in the second round by Cyril Gane. Prior to that, he had been on a 3-fight win streak, including an eye-opening absolute domination of Derek Lewis last February. So Spivak looking to get back on track here. He is mildly favored to do so. In their first fight, Tybura was a slight favorite. This time around, it is Spivak coming in at minus 140, Tybura plus 110. So I kind of crapped all over the rematch here. And I should mention, these two already fought once. They fought back in February of 2020 with Tybura winning a unanimous decision. I kind of criticized the UFC for rebooking this fight or booking a rematch that nobody was really clamoring for. And when I said, is this the worst rematch between top 10 fighters in recent memory or one of the worst in MMA history, there were a couple things I was thinking of. One, the first fight was not exactly a barn burner. It's not like Robbie Lawler versus Rory McDonald, where it's like, oh, dude, run that back anytime. It was just another heavyweight fight. The other things being divisional relevance. Like, yeah, these guys are both ranked heavyweights, but neither of them is especially close to a title shot. So it's not like, well, he needed to beat someone in the top 10 to get that last win. The one thing I will say in favor of this is that the line is flipped. So it's at least been enough time that we have reason to believe it might go differently the next time around. Spivak is one of the more improved fighters in the heavyweight division over the course of the last 5 years. He debuted in the UFC back in 2019, and you and I were not, or 2018, you and I were not doing the previews yet, but I was working for Sherdog at the time. And I remember saying at the time, this 9-0 guy from Moldova is not ready for the UFC. If you got into the UFC because of wins over Travis Fulton and Tony Lopez, you are not ready for the UFC.
Who doesn't have wins over those guys?
Yeah. And when you debut and you get splattered in like a minute by Walt Harris, I feel pretty good about my assessment. But he is such a different fighter than he was then in a lot of ways. One, he was 24 years old at the time. And while, he was like a 250-pound guy, he was just kind of a big, nondescript, doughy dude. He is physically transformed. And part of that is just aging from 24 to 29. Part of it is, I'm sure, well, it's 5 more years of training, 6 more years of training under his belt. Probably the first years of his life, he's actually been training full time as a fighter because he's finally making a little bit of money. So for a guy whose game was probably always going to be dependent on being able to physically boss other heavyweights around, that's going to help already all by itself. At this point, both these guys are pretty similar. Like they're both fighters who are reliable gatekeepers to the top 7 or 8 and reliably come up short when they fight somebody above that level. Like, Tybura has been in the UFC a lot longer than Tybura or than Spivak. He's, almost 10 years older, but it's a very similar thing for him. You give him the Greg Hardys of the world, the ghost of Ben Rothwell, the ghost of Blagoy Ivanov, he's going to win. It's not going to be much fun to watch, but he's not going to make some huge mistake that's going to let him lose to an inferior fighter. Spivak has a lot of the same vibe, but at this point, you'd have to say he has a lot more upside. Tybura has been doing this for a long time. He's probably not going to get any better, and he's reaching that point where even at heavyweight, he's going to start getting worse, where Spivak might actually be improving. His striking is still ugly, but he's got good power, and he's willing to throw a lot. He's always wanted to wrestle and take people down and pound them out from top position or find submissions after pounding on them. He's gotten better able to do that as he's just gotten more physically strong and in better shape. He's more athletic than I thought he was. Again, in 2018, 2019, he was just sort of a big, dumpy dude who didn't look especially nimble on his feet. His hands didn't look especially fast. That's changed. I think he is, he's not Cyril Gane. He's not Tom Aspinall, but he is a plus athlete by the standards of the division. And at 29, it's very possible that his best years are ahead of him. I expect this fight will look a lot like the first fight, just that a few more of those clinch situations and a few more of those wrestling sequences will go the way of Spivak. He's just improved, while Tybura is basically the same guy he was in 2018, 2019. The fact that this is going to be 5 rounds gives me a little bit of concern for Spivak, but while both of these guys, or while Tybura has been booked in more 5-round fights than Spivak, and so he's had more camps for them, neither of them has fought past the 3rd round very much. I think Tybura has once or twice, but so it's not even like I'm worried that Spivak is just going to gas out horribly if the thing goes past the middle of the 3rd round. I don't think this one will be especially exciting. I don't think anyone's going to be calling for the trilogy fight if Spivak does even it up at 1-1, but if they do it and it's another 5 or 6 years from now, who knows? Give me Spivak in a decision here. And again, I expect this will be close from round to round, but just a few of those sequences where Tybura was able to take Spivak down, or Tybura was able to deny the takedown and keep beating up Spivak on the feet, I expect those will go the other way this time, just thanks to the passage of time and one fighter having improved more than the other.
Yeah, so you said something that I totally agree with. You talked about the cardio. I just don't think this fight will be fought at that high of a pace where either guy gets out, or if they do, it's going to be a clinch battle. So it's going to be like I don't think I don't think it's going to be a natural guy getting tired. I think it's either be a really slow distance kickboxing fight where neither guy's getting tired, or it's going to be in the clinch and they're both exhausted and then just hugging each other, slapping titties. So I said off the air that we both have to take Spivak to get a consensus underdog pick. That's why I was surprised. I thought Tybura was going to be like a negative 180, something like that, favorite based that he won the last fight, and they're both kind of on the same winning percentages over since that point. Like they beat the 20, 25 ranked heavyweight. They might beat the lower top 15 fighter, but they're not. Then every time they fight the top 5 guy, they're not winning. So I kind of view them similar. So that's why I thought Tybura would be the one that's the favorite. Yeah, Tybura's age 38, like that worries me, except that it's heavyweight. That's like that's somewhat normal. He's a pretty well-rounded fighter. He's got good volume for heavyweight. Constantly moving forward, marching down his opponent. He likes to kind of force his opponent onto their back foot. He likes that like push kick to do it. Like he'll throw this like push kick to get him on the back foot. He wants to force them on the back because he doesn't like being pressured himself. He even despite his age, he's got pretty good hand speed. He likes to use his striking and pressure to close the distance. He loves grabbing an underhook and just grinding against the fence, just leaning on it, leaning on his opponent. He also excels at just like wearing down his opponent and then just dropping down a single and running the pipe and getting the fight to the ground. He also like catch a kick to get the fight to the ground. He's a BJJ black belt. I'm going to take that for what it's worth. He's got pretty good top game though. And he's, we talk about Spivak and his submissions. I mean, Tybura has 8 submissions himself. So is that something we think of Tybura as this big, submission artist? But I mean, obviously, like subbing Tai Tuivasa, like whatever, but I'm just saying, generally speaking, like you think of Tybura as like a grinder or like a, the heavyweight striker that doesn't have the power, more like the cumulative striker. Spivak, yeah, the best thing about him is still his age. I mean, he's such a baby. We could be doing this show 10 years from now, and he's just, he could still be ranked in the top 10, which is, wouldn't be surprising. The problem is, I don't think he's a good athlete. Like and especially when you see him against, the elite the elite athletes of the division. I mean, like his
Gone and Aspinall made him look like he was standing in cement.
Exactly. I mean, Gone. I mean, he struggled with the speed of Gone. I like that you point out that his striking has improved. I think he's a better striker than he gets credited with, but I still don't think he's a great striker. Like I think Tybura is a better technical striker. He works behind a jab. He beat up Carlos Felipe with a jab. Again, take that for what it's worth. But he's been, following up with 1-2s. He'll throw some kicks, but they're more just kind of like throwing out there, just keeping busy than doing damage. Very basic kicking game. I hate his defense though. My biggest issue, and I always say this, but he lacks head movements, but he just pillars, which makes him so hittable. I mean, Cyril Gane battered him because of that. He will wrestle a lot, but I think his wrestling is grossly overrated. I mean, he couldn't get Cyril Gane down. So and that's Cyril Gane's not a good wrestler. He likes to close the distance and just grind in the clinch. His best takeout is probably his foot sweeps. Like he'll hit a foot sweep or a throw. He'll do lateral drops, which I absolutely hate. I don't hate lateral drops. I hate lateral drops at heavyweight. He also do like some ugly headlocks. Like he can do it because you can headlock guys like Tai Tuivasa and stuff. But he's willing to give up his back. And you got a big heavyweight, you go for a headlock, and next week you're on bottom. The guy's got back mount. You could be in trouble. He will shoot from the outside. Shooting entries, grabbing snatch singles. He ran right through Derek Lewis on the ground. He's got pretty busy ground and pound, and he's got 6 subs. So obviously we don't have a consensus upset pick because you didn't pick the upset there. No, and I'm not trying to bash. I'm not good at setting lines, guys. I thought Tybura was going to be the favorite. We're not going to have the same pick, man. Tybura is the more well-rounded fighter. I think he can match Spivak really everywhere. I don't really see it. I mean, I guess Spivak. My one concern is Spivak if he hits like a lateral drop or something. And I guess he's younger. He could make improvements, and I think that's a good point. And obviously, Tybura could be at the age where he's declining. I still think Tybura has a big advantage on the feet. I expect him to pick apart Spivak from range. I think the phase is going to slow down, and we're going to get a boring, like slower kickboxing fight with it, not throwing many punches, one or two punch combinations. When they get to the clinch, I actually think Tybura can win the clinch too. I think it's going to go all 25 minutes. I think it would be miserable, and give me Tybura by decision.
All right. And that is it. The Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC on ESPN 61, Tybura versus Spivak 2. I've been Ben.
Can I interrupt you real quick? Just because I want to give our listeners, one listener reached out to me this week, and he asked me to do this, and I said I'd do it on the preview show. He asked for my Olympic wrestling, starts tomorrow morning, the Olympic wrestling, to give my predictions. I told him, I said, that's what I'll do. I'll give you some bold predictions. I'm going to do it right now. I want to say between Greco-Roman, women's freestyle, and men's freestyle, America's going to take home 5 gold medals. I'm going big. I think it's going to be one of the best Olympics. Obviously, the favorites, I think Kyle Dake. I actually used to live in the same hometown as Kyle Dake. I've told you the Kyle Dake story. I think he's finally going to get his gold. I think he's going to dominate. I think Amit Elor, a female wrestler, I think she's might be the best pound female wrestler in the world. Shame on the Olympics. They put the 2 best people in the world against each other in the first matchup. Like, it probably got it 9:00 tomorrow morning, but people probably watch this. Probably Olympic matchup. It should be Olympic gold matchup. Excuse me. I'm going to give you a couple other ones. One that a lot of people like is it's a loaded field, but I think Spencer Lee is going to do it. This is the guy that the wrestling community turned against Spencer Lee after he lost his, going for his 4th NCAA title, and now he's like everyone's sweetheart again. I think he's going to get it done. Yeah, he's got to go through US Donnie, but I ain't taking anybody to beat Aaron Brooks right now the way he's wrestling. I'm taking Aaron Brooks to win. And here's my really bold one. Kennedy Blade's only 20 years old. I think she's going to win an Olympic gold. Only 20 years old. You want me to go even bolder, Ben?
Yes.
I want to go even bolder. All 6 men medal. All 6 of them. And I'm going to go even bolder. This is going to be even way bolder. All 6 women medal.
All right.
That would be insane. I'm taking it. And all the Greco guys all the Greco guys don't do shit. They all lose.
All right. After that bit of
so don't mess with me this week because I'm just watching USA Olympic wrestling all week. So
after that bit of bonus Olympic wrestling content, this has been the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC on ESPN 61, Tybura versus Spivak 2. I have been Ben. He has been Keith. If this is your first time watching or listening to one of our previews, thank you. We hope you enjoyed it. Just know that this is the shortest preview we've ever done and the only one with no unanimous upset picks that I can remember. But do like, subscribe, drop us a comment. Keith and I both man the comment section. We'd love to hear your take on these fights. If you think either of us missed any sneaky good upset calls, let us know, because if you're right and we're wrong, we will give you all your flowers on the recap. You should join us for the recap. We're live on the Sherdog YouTube page right after the main event. Keith will take the captain's chair. We will talk about all 11 of these fights in reverse order, from that headliner all the way down to the women's strawweight opener, talking about what's good, what's bad, what was surprising, what was controversial. There's always something. Talking about what's next for some of the notable winners as well as losers, and talking with you. The live chat on the YouTube page is open that whole time, so we're taking your questions, your comments, and your hot takes in real time. We have a growing community of friends that hang out with us after the fights, and we would love for you to be part of it. Between now and then, thank you once again for listening. Enjoy the rest of your week, and by all means, enjoy these fights.
To the sea. you better fairy tales while